Welcome to Spirited Straight Talk, the ultimate podcast for anyone who is ready to live a life with intention and help from spirit. I am your host, Deb Shepard, spiritual teacher, medium, and author, helping you open up to the whole enchilada, or like we like to say, the soul enchilada, so you can truly make your soul rise. So let's go. We have a really important topic today for our podcast, and this is something that has been discussed throughout all my classes as well as when people have readings, and we know what that topic is: abandonment. We need a drum roll or something with that.
It's a big topic.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that affect us in so many different ways. I don't think people realize that if you've been abandoned in different parts of your life, that it can really affect how you show up and how you take care of yourself through life. Mm-hmm. And we've obviously had those experiences that we're going to share probably a little bit today, but really it's about, what happens when you're abandoned, and then what do you do to respond, and how do you kind of stop that domino effect, as well as kind of change how you feel about it and how you can get some more insight on it. So
a new way to look at abandonment.
Yes.
A new way to deal with it then.
I think people, when they feel abandoned by family and friends or whatever the situation is, they feel that they're not valuable and that they're not worthy. And I think that's number one. I think people feel like they don't have a voice. They may play smaller in their life. They may give a lot more in relationships because they want to be able to have people need them and attach to them, not realizing that this is not a healthy way to have a relationship in life. Mm-hmm. And you and I have certainly experienced that, and I think you go from one extreme to the opposite, where one is that when you get abandoned, you never want to abandon anybody, so you just hang in there. And then the other part of it is that we abandoned everybody because
we want to shut them out.
We want to shut them out. We want to protect ourselves. We don't want to be hurt again. And I think that's really hard when you're wanting to have a partnership in your life, that we become so protected that we don't want to get hurt again. And so it's finding kind of a balance and when to trust your intuition. And is abandonment always a good thing? Because there's sometimes when
you want to let go.
Yeah.
What does not serve you.
Yeah. And if you're, a spiritual person and you've been working on your life purpose and really trying to find some of these patterns, as well as, change your energy and your vibration, and it's important to find people that are more aligned. Mm-hmm. And when these relationships leave us, sometimes it's about creating space for other relationships that are more aligned, because I think a lot of us feel like we have to prostitute ourselves in effort to keep certain relationships in our lives. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, they're really not loving us, they're loving our performance. And that ends up working on our psyche, our energy, our vibe, and then we start wondering why things are not working the way we want them to. And so you may want to manifest this partnership, or you want to manifest a support system or like-minded people, but are we holding on to things that no longer really serve us? And it could be relationships that people even have crossed over. Mm-hmm. So if something has happened to someone, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever that time frame is, are we still going back to that and feeling that pain versus what did we benefit from it? And I think today is about where the benefits from abandonment and when it's appropriate for us to abandon things. Because I think it's hard for us to sort of surrender to the idea that we're no longer having to have that individual or person in our life. Mm-hmm. So, does that make sense to you?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And we see people in your classes all the time that have these types of things happening in their life. They close themselves up so tightly that they can't seem to bring relationships into their life at all because they're so afraid of being abandoned.
Right.
So that's like the flip side of abandonment, I think, is like you're so wound up with protecting yourself that you block everyone out. Mm-hmm. And I know I've been there.
Yeah, and it's abandoning yourself then from possibilities. Mm-hmm. That you're just saying, I can't have anything in my life that's going to, support me. And I think the other thing is realizing that when things are toxic, we sometimes feel that we need to fix it or we want to heal it, and then that way it'll make it all okay. And I think it's really coming to terms with, they don't think it's broken. Mm-hmm. They're not here to change for us. Mm-hmm. And it's getting sort of an understanding. And of course, I have understood abandonment throughout my life, of being abandoned by religion and my community and family. And I had to come to terms with what benefits did that come to me over time. And then becoming a medium, of course, creates some abandonment. I was pretty fortunate to have some support from family. I think I was kind of pushing the edge of the envelope over those years. And then, of course, you and I ended up together. And I think there can be abandonment and judgment from people knowing that, there's, again, some belief systems out there that would not support this. And what I've had to learn over time and what I teach is, if people can't appreciate who you are or the steps that you're taking, and you can't be transparent and authentic, do you want those people in your life? Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing, we try to prove to them that we are acceptable. And I think that we don't need to talk people into it. It's really finding that community that supports this. And sometimes are we going to abandon those individuals or those belief systems to find our alignment in the community that really helps us move forward in our lives?
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about authenticity, you have a take on authenticity and I guess unconditional love is what
absolutely. And it's
and for yourself
I think over time though, it's taken me time to get to the place where, and we're going to make the definition of unconditional love, but I think also it's understanding that it's okay for not ever to accept who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the hardest thing, and I think it takes time in life to say, you know what, you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to be on the same page as me. And coming to those terms does take a while, and it takes that value and confidence and empowerment. But I also teach the biggest thing is about unconditional love. And a lot of people think unconditional love means loving someone no matter what. And I think that's not really my take on it. A lot of people will say, well, a dog is unconditional. And I think that's 100% true. And what I teach is being authentic to your soul and receiving love the only way they can give it. And a lot of times we will change who we are so that people will love us, but then they're loving who we're pretending to be versus our authentic self. And so if you're being authentic and people are going to judge you, it's learning to accept that that's all they're capable of. And it's all they can do is, from their belief system and their perspective in life, is, guess what? I'm going to judge you. You can still be in my life, but I don't have to agree. For the other side is, are we okay with that? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that we're all here to learn, is it's okay that people don't always agree. And of course, in this last year for 2020, we've had so much diversity and so much controversy that I think it was a real challenge for a lot of us to say, my value is mine, but I support yours because we're not on the same page. And that's hard to do. Mm-hmm. We want to prove to people how we're right.
Yeah, and we have experienced abandonment this past year because we didn't conform with somebody else's belief system. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, and what was interesting for me was your response to that.
Yeah.
As well, with
just love.
You responded with love. Yeah. To
it's okay that we don't have to be aligned. We think that being aligned or everyone having the kumbaya means that there is some value to you. So what happens with abandonment, if we go back in time, we are told things that create sort of a definition of our souls, and it's taking that mindset and changing that their opinions were their opinions, but it doesn't change our value and worth. And so sometimes abandonment does create a lack of being able to accomplish a lot in our lives, because we have felt like, if I do this, if I show up, if I become a leader, if I become more transparent, I will be judged and abandoned. Mm-hmm. So many times people play small because of the fear. Mm-hmm. And versus saying, you know what, it's okay that I'm abandoned because that means I am making a difference. I am making change. I am living my full out life. And even coming to terms with you and I, it took me a little while to take ownership. And it wasn't that I didn't love you and that I wasn't proud, but it was, okay, am I ready to respond to people? And that was where...
That was more of what I saw you going through was, how do I respond when I get questions or when I get the... why are you doing that?
The pushback.
the pushback, which in some of the cases was very kind.
Yes.
In other cases, it was like, what?
Yeah, we had some interesting questions, but part of when you decide not to abandon your soul and your authentic self, you do become a leader and educator.
Yeah.
Because some people are not willing to step into that pool because they don't know how to manage it. And when you lead it and you teach it, people go, oh, well, I guess it's not a big deal. And so it gives other people permission to be able to be more authentic and really trust who they are and not abandon what they truly are. We've seen a lot of people in our lives where we're going, they're not living their authentic life. And they've sort of abandoned who they really are in an effort to have this idea of life.
Yeah.
Like, it needs to look this way, so I'm going to live this way. And then several years later down the road, we see them change because you can only so long be able to perform that way. There's only so long that your soul finally goes, I can't do this anymore. And so abandonment sometimes feels like we're giving up, or we're not going to pursue a situation, where sometimes abandonment is really valuing yourself.
Yourself, yeah.
It's self-love.
And I think that's really hard if you've been abandoned, especially if your abandonment started as a child.
Which yours certainly had.
Mine did, yeah. My mom left when I was a year old. Somewhat by her own choice and somewhat pushed into it after she made that decision already.
Because people had an idea or a belief of what it should look like.
Yeah, exactly. And there became a big fight over me, but ultimately she left and left me in capable hands, but left. And that was my mom, at a year old. So, and it continued. It continued over life, and I even felt abandoned. I think when they weren't abandoning me, but they were forced out of my life, I felt that abandonment though. And so you continue that pattern. So I continued it into my relationships as an adult, picking people that I knew were going to abandon me from a spiritual perspective. I can see that now, looking back, but when you're right in the thick of it, you're desperately wanting to be loved and accepted.
No matter under any circumstances.
Right. And so you accept things that you don't think you would.
Especially the abuse stuff. Sometimes I see people, including our previous relationships, where we put up with abuse because we didn't want to abandon the situation. Or
abandon that person because you feel like they need you.
Right.
They've kind of trapped you into that way of thinking in a way.
And, this is even in my book. People know that my late husband suicided, and a lot of it that he became really mentally disabled is the word that's coming to mind. And you feel as if you have to stay with them because what are they going to do? He couldn't take care of himself financially, emotionally, all those kind of things. And then I finally came to a point where I'm not responsible for them any longer. But it takes so much for you to get there. And then dealing with any guilt or what happens throughout, the journey, the after effect. And for him, he suicided, and even in his letters, he blamed me for it. But I had to come to terms with, I am not responsible for the other person's happiness. And I think we do hold on to relationships longer because we're thinking, I am responsible. They've told me I'm responsible. Maybe I can't get anyone better. This is all I can get. And this is my pattern. My pattern has proven that this is all I can get. I also realize that if you've been abandoned a lot in your life, you know how it feels. So the last thing you're going to do is abandon somebody else. So it's finding that balance of what we are bringing into our life. What are our lessons? And as you know, I've always taught that our purpose isn't our job. My purpose isn't to be a medium and a teacher and these things. My job is, or my purpose is to learn these lessons of enlightenment. And part of what comes with it is that abandonment. And so it's these classroom settings that we have that we can participate in and decide how we're going to manage it. Over time, it becomes faster.
Yeah.
We don't take years to kind of get the aha. But it takes time. And it takes time to even look at what I've been through in this last year. I've had a lot of wake-up calls about my health. Quit abandoning my health. Start paying attention. I deserve to have a healthy body and healthy mind. And thank goodness that you've been here not abandoning me. It's almost tears in my eyes because you just kept pursuing answers. And I think we get so busy with other things that we abandon what our needs are, what we need to do in order to take care of ourselves to be the highest good and highest energy vibration that we can create.
Well, and you absorb everyone else's energy.
Yeah.
So, a lot of that I think is your body absorbing that, which coming to the realization that if you are healthier in the way you feel, maybe that won't affect you as much as it was.
Maybe I just need to hang around highly athletic people. absorb their energy. All of a sudden I have this fit body.
Exercise by osmosis.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know about that.
So, this is a topic that I think is always brought up in all my classes with, private sessions. You and I have, of course, discussed it. And I think the way to kind of address abandonment is to really see your value, first of all, and really see that other people's belief systems aren't really yours, and really finding a way to abandon those belief systems. And, we look at how people believe in different things, and it's not right or wrong, it's what they need, but it doesn't always resonate with our own soul. And if you've been in an environment, in a family, in a community that you feel differently than, it's really hard to kind of break away and abandon that and step into your own authenticity, which I can...
Authenticity.
Thank you. So that you can be really bringing in and align people that are of that same energy. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I'm thinking of somebody we know that's going through that re-emerging, I guess you could say. They were heavily involved in a religious sect.
Which I was too.
Did not serve them.
But this isn't recent for me, but recent for this person. Friend
you've
of
gone
ours.
through this.
Yeah, a long time ago.
You went through this completely.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
But when you see someone recently that's going through it, there are so many levels of emotion.
Yeah.
And so much judgment. And then I think there is the grieving of that part of your life that you may have given up for that belief. And you feel like, okay, I believed this for so many years, I can never get that back. And that's where I think there's a struggle for some people to kind of push through it. I always say it's the rebirth without the epidural. How do you push through it and then not have the anger and the guilt and all those things that go along with that time in your life?
So that's a form of abandonment as well.
Correct. And guess what happens? You feel abandoned during that time, even though that's your community, and then you have to abandon it and begin to heal from finding that new way of living.
So what would you say to somebody that is pushing everyone away because they were abandoned previously, and they stop relationships in a way, subconsciously even, sometimes they don't realize it. They don't need anybody, so they put themselves in a position where they don't need anybody.
Correct.
And that's not always the best place to be.
I think when there's no tools, people begin to maybe start there because it's the only thing that they can have a voice or a power. So they're feeling that I'm assuming from what I've seen is I need to get my power back, and the only way I can do that is not have any influences. No one else's energy. I'm just going to cut everybody off. It's sort of like going into, how the caterpillar, goes into the cocoon. It's sort of going into that cocoon and saying, I need to really kind of figure out how to manage all this. And I think there's going to be all those layers of grief. And grief has those 5 stages. There's that denial. There is, the bargaining. There is all these different things that we go through, or people go through, to try to figure out how to, I'm going to use the word reinvent or step back out there again. And allow for people to feel safe. And that's the big key, is when do people feel safe to step back in there? And how do you bring people back into your community? Do you know what to look for? Mm-hmm. Because if you've only known those situations, then you go into the cocoon. How do you know that you won't repeat those patterns? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the fear and that stuff goes. So it's
so is it just realization and making a choice?
I think it is making a choice. I think it's really communicating with what you need and how to open your heart again. And I think what happens for people is that our gut always tells us something, but we stop trusting our gut. And so we give that trust to other people, and then when they hurt us, we just feel like it's everybody else. We're not trusting our intuition. So it's tuning into that intuition again by saying, how does this feel? How does this make me feel? Can I let this person back in? What do I need to say? And how do you create those boundaries? And I always say it's baby steps, getting people that are familiar and comfortable and stepping into that. I think the other thing is having fun. I think people forget fun. Everyone tries to play it safe. And life isn't always safe. Taking those risks and stepping out there. I know when I started this journey of becoming a medium as a full-time job, I remember doing the radio show and thinking, either this is going to work or it's not going to work. And thinking to myself when I did the radio show afterwards, like, I'm going to do this. And I had no idea what was going to happen. But I knew what I was doing was not working. And I think it's people realizing what you've done is not working. What can you do differently? And how do you find those new tools? And of course, in our workshops, we talk about them being power tools. Mm-hmm. The hammers and the saws are, no longer as important as those power tools that
the emotional power tools.
Yeah, that we do. That didn't work, so what can I do differently? And it is learning and having guidance along the way of how do you step into a new way of living. And you're going to have those hiccups. I think people sometimes keep that barrier up because they never want to feel the pain again. But in order to be intuitive and in order to really experience life, we have to experience the joy and the pain and the love and the disappointments. And I think that's what's scary for people. So going back to then, how do you manage the pain? What are your tools? Because it's easy to handle joy, mm-hmm. unless you feel guilty about it.
It's true.
Some people feel guilty about having joy. Yeah. So going back and stepping into this place that you want to create a life is taking those little steps, realizing it's okay and that you are going to feel all emotions, but having those power tools and also a support system, whatever that is. It may be a therapist, it may be a spiritual person, it may be your dog in nature that helps you, kind of gain that energy back. Mm-hmm.
Fill your bucket.
Fill your bucket. Yeah. If you haven't listened to the live class that I did in January 1st, I think it was. 4th. It was all about how to fill your bucket. And when people keep bumping your bucket, your soul is the water and it keeps coming out.
I think we should do that as a podcast.
And what happens is, we were born with this full bucket, but over time people will keep pushing it and we lose part of ourselves. And so we want to hold on to what's left versus realizing we can fill up that bucket again. Mm-hmm. And you filled up my bucket again. So you know.
Well, you filled my bucket.
Fill my bucket. So the whole point of all this is to realize that we do have the power to understand abandonment and not abandon ourselves and find the new ways to say, okay, this has been my pattern. I don't want to continue that pattern, but I want to have the ability to be able to respond to abandonment and really put myself as a priority. And I feel like women have more of a challenge to put themselves first. And we get burnt out to the point where I end up in the hospital, right, for 4 days, and having to go, okay, I need to, reboot again and find ways to create that balance again.
Be authentic to your soul.
Yes.
And receive.
Love the only way they can give it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And that means the universe too, right?
Yeah, because I think we feel like we're on our own when we feel abandoned. And I think one of the last resources is to remember that the universe has always been there. Our guides, all those things have never left us. They never abandoned us. We just forgot to remember that they were always there. And it's reconnecting with that source again, so that even if you feel moments where you're alone, that the universe and everything in it is still there supporting you and cheering you on, and it's letting them in to be able to feel that. And it's really beautiful when you allow that to be in.
So what would you say are the top 5 things people should focus on
Regarding abandonment?
When they're dealing with abandonment feelings, or
Sure.
they know it's a recurring thing and they're trying to get through that?
I think number one is abandonment doesn't create a value, because I think people play so much smaller when they feel abandoned and they really don't live their full authentic life, because that judgment, that abandonment makes them feel that they're not worthy. So number one.
Self-love.
To self-love.
Is a big part of that.
Yeah. And I have all those little exercises I have people do. And one of them, if you're open to this, is writing down 50 to 100 things you love about yourself. And people just get overwhelmed.
I had a hard time doing that when I was going through mentoring.
Yeah. Part of it is that, if you look at how people see you, the people that really love you, not the ones that are judging you and banning you, but we think about, you're a great cook. You're really good at organizing. I'm talking about Dana, not me.
Oh, that's me.
You think of all these great ideas. You're a great driver. You're a defensive driver. We don't think that's being a big deal, but if I'm driving, your defensive driving is a big deal. So it's really seeing that value and worth of what we work really hard to do in our everyday life. So remembering, what you are and who that soul is when you came into this earth to learn these lessons. I think the second thing, which kind of really relates to this, is not to abandon yourself and to have moments of joy. And that every time, I think a lot of people see their value by some accomplishments that other people see. Oh, I graduated, or I got this job, or I got this, or I earned that. And those things are great accomplishments on a human level, but I think it's also remembering just to have time for ourselves. And there's so much guilt around just having joy or finding things that are joyful. Trying to get people to be creative or find pleasure seems to be really difficult. Again, it's not abandon yourself from that. I think it's also realizing that when these relationships end, to see the gratitude and the value that, do you not have to prostitute yourself anymore? Were you really being you with that individual? Could you say what you needed to say? Did you feel safe in that relationship? Did you feel as if they always had your back? And I think that when these...
Or did you abandon yourself in that
relationship? Right.
Yeah.
And so when we grieve these losses, can we go back to say, you know what? I need to love myself, and that person only loved me when I pretended. So it's I think that's a third. 2 is, or 3, wherever we are, 4, is to look at relationships that are more aligned. And it might be really searching for people that have a similar belief system. It doesn't have to be what you and I believe, but it might be that their politics or their faith or what they feel,
cooking.
Or cooking.
Or it could be a group that finds joy in the same things
saving
as you.
the planet, whatever that is, saving the animals. So it's finding that group that you feel like you can really be transparent and safe and accepted for who you are. And it may take some time to search for that. And you may not even know what you're searching for. And I've heard that people go, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I don't know, because they've been pretending for such a long period of time. So I think that's the other one. And I think the last one would be, this isn't going to go away. So knowing that is have all your power tools to how to respond when you are abandoned. And for me, when I get abandoned, it takes me time. I have to marinate. You know me, I need to marinate. So for me, I sit and marinate before I go forward, respond. And a lot of people want to defend themselves right away, and they want to use their voice, or they play really small and just hide and think this is happening again to me. And I think it's important to say, this is another opportunity for me to have my voice and my value. How are you going to step into this? So it doesn't go away. It just means that we're still learning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the big takeaway here is it never goes away, but find your tools, take it head on.
Give us like one example of a power tool. When you talk about power tools, we talked about the 5 things you can do.
Right. I think part of it is really having a voice. And what I notice with a lot of people that feel abandoned, they don't have a voice.
They should work on their throat
chakra. And basically, whether it's doing martial arts or taking a public speaking class, or screaming in your car, or writing, whatever that looks like. Of course, that chakra is the color blue, wearing a lot of blue. But I think it's sitting down and saying, I understand that you're judging me, abandoning me, and tell that person that. But guess what? It doesn't change who I am. I know who I am. But I accept the fact that it doesn't align with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not arguing. I think a lot of it is that we want to prove our point. And with certain situations, we're never going to be able to prove it. What you can do is just make a statement. And that, to me, would be the first step in order to achieve some of these situations. And for some people, it might be really, really healing to go back to past relationships if they're open to that, or writing a letter and burning it so you're speaking to the universe, or writing a letter and reading it to a friend that we call holding space, so that you can have that verbal thing. You're telling the universe that Nat no longer identifies of who you are.
Mm-hmm. So writing a letter to the universe, sharing what you want your life to look like without that
right.
Piece in it.
And I think part of it is, if that abandonment doesn't go away, still move forward, but acknowledge it and have the ability and know what it is and have the ability to address it head on sooner than later.
So our soul enchilada for today
is
being authentic to your soul and receiving love the only way they know how to give it, which is your definition of unconditional love.
Absolutely. Write it down and read it, because that's a lot for people to process sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you again for joining us for Spirited Straight Talk, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Spirited Straight Talk. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so that you get notified of new shows. We'd also love it if you'd leave us a review. And let's connect. Visit debshepard.com for more insights, support, workshops, and to book a session with Deb. Plus, enter to get a free reading with Deb. All you have to do is sign up for the email list and you'll automatically be entered. Just go to debshepard.com. That's DEBSHEPPARD.com.